There we go.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning, guys. Kevin, how's the sound over here? Okay, Baruch Hashem.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Good, 8. All right. Turn on the simcha over here. Allah hachanis. Okay, everything is ready. There we go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, Hilchos Berachos, Dalid, Hey, and Vav, beginning with Perek Revi. Perek Revi is going to deal with the importance of benching in the location that you ate, scenarios where you have to return, where you don't have to return. It's going to deal with what brachas, when one makes one of them, covers others or not, and the concept of Hesach Hadas, or the meal ended, and therefore, as we'll see, you have to make a Berachos Hamazon and you have to make another Bracha Rishayna, because halachically the Kvius Su'uda was over, or there was Hesach Hadas, and everything related to these 3 topics. Perek Revi Chevra has 12 halachas, and starting with halacha Aleph. Simple rules, says the Rambam. Kol hamavarich Berachos Hamazon. When you recited Berachos Hamazon, Oy bracha achas me'ein shalish, as we learned in the previous chapter, the rule is tzarech levarech oisa, it must be made b'makim sha'achel, in the place that you ate. In other words, prior to you getting up, you finished the meal, blessed the Eibishter. Now, says the Rambam, achal kishuhu mahalach. No, it's the concept that you have to make a bracha, achreina, where you ate. What happens if I never had a place where I ate? Because I was eating while I was walking. Pseider. So wherever it is that you finished eating the sandwich or whatever you were eating, Yoshev Amakim Shepasek, sit down in that location and Vivarach make the bracha. What happens if Achal Kishuhu Oymeid? So here, as we mentioned, you're supposed to bench while you're sitting. Here it's even easier because you have a makim. You were standing. So if you're standing, with the Rambam wrote in Hilchos Deyos, not to eat when you're standing. But if you ate when you're standing, Yoshev b'mekoymai, sit down and make the after brach. Now what happens if you didn't do that? I didn't bench in the place that I ate. So shachach levarich Berachos Hamazon, a person finished the meal, they forgot to bench, they went away. So if they remembered that they didn't yet bench when the food was not yet digested, we already learned in the beginning of Hilchos Brachos in the Rambam that after the food is digested, let's go with the approach, do I feel hungry? If I feel hungry for the new meal, we're speaking about people that ate 2 meals a day, not that they're constantly eating so they're constantly hungry, but people that got habituated in the healthy way of living, which is you eat by a meal and then you don't eat. If you're hungry, it means the food got digested. That's the way we're going to understand. If you remembered when you don't feel hungry yet, which means you are allowed to bench. So the rule is, my friends, mevarich b'makim sheniskar. You bench in the place where you chapped, where you remember that you didn't bench. In other words, since you did not leave the location of your meal, b'mezid, knowing I have to bench, and so then they did not tell you that you're mechuyev to go back. You understand? In such a scenario, it was a shikha. As long as you are able to bench in the place that you remembered, you don't need to return. But that's only because you were a shoygik. But im mezid, a person ate in a location. They know they have to bench in this location. And they walked away. There, lechatchili, you have to go back. But even in this case, paskins the Rambam, and if the person didn't do that, in Beirach, b'makim sheniskar, post facto, b'di'eved, that also yotzi yedei chavos. V'chein, in Beirach kishu oimed, we mentioned that you should bench while you're sitting. A person didn't do that. They benched while they were standing, or even worse, they benched when they were walking. So if you remember, by Shema, it's b'chlal not a problem, right? Other than the first Shema Yisrael. But by benching, no. Ideally, you should sit for the whole benching. But if you didn't, also post facto, yotzi yedei chavos. What's the ideal? Berachos Hamazon and bracha me'ein shalish to the exclusion of boirin nefashos. You should be sitting down and you should make it b'makim shachal. That's the rule of halacha aleph. That's the premise. Now, halacha beis, mishin is tapik loim berach hamoitzim loy berach hamoitzim. If you have a suffix, so even though we learned in the previous chapter, if you have a suffix whether you benched or not, right? These sveits considered the sveik of doiraisa because Berachos Hamazon is doiraisa. But if the doubt is whether you made the bracha prior to eating, brachas prior to eating, Berachos Hamazon is midrabanan, ein chayzram avarech. Because since the bracha prior to eating is einoy min haTorah, and let's compound it with that which the Rambam holds very strongly, that if you make a bracha that's not necessary, this is taking God's name in vain. This is like taking, God forbid, an oath, in false oath. So we say the concept that Safik brachas midivreim, you have to be lenient. That's the chumrah. Yeah.
If you forgot to say hamoitzi, that means you probably forgot to say netilas yadayim.
Let's not focus on netilas yadayim. So that's very important. Let's not mix them up together. Let's focus on brachas now, Zelik. Now, what happens if you don't have a doubt? If you know that you didn't make hamoitzi, shachach levarech hamoitzi. What do? You're already in the middle of the eating. Very simple. If you didn't finish eating yet, right now make the bracha. But if you already finished eating, you finished eating, don't make a bracha of hamoitzi. I want you to know in Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe writes that it's ideal, even though you finished eating, and it's not healthy to eat when you finished eating, eat a little bit more in order for you to be able to make the bracha Rishon. Halacha Gimel. If you ate in one house, upasak suudasi, guys, be medayik in these words. Upasak suudasi means that you did not eat to your satisfaction. Pasak suudasi means you still need to eat more, but you didn't. That's going to be key. And you went to another home. Now we're not speaking about a case that lechatchila, when you washed here, you had in mind to continue there. That's not a problem to continue there. That's not the case. You did not finish your meal. You went to another location. Or even you didn't go to another location. The key is not where you went to. The key is that you left your current location. So the Rambam is giving a practical scenario. Why would you leave your current location? Innocently. You're eating. The whole house was one cheder. Someone wanted to tell you something private. So he asked you, please come outdoors. You went right outside your house. You are not under the roof. You didn't go to another place, but you're not in the location. So the rule is, now guys, this is very important. Hoyel v'shina mekaymai. Since you changed your location, that change of location ended the meal. That's why I wanted to emphasize that at the beginning of Halacha Gimel, upaisik su'udas, and it's if you finish the meal. We're going to learn about that soon. Even if you didn't change your location. Once there is hesach hadas, that in itself ends the meal. You still plan to eat. For whatever reason, you went to another place, or you left the roof. Sarech levarech lemafreya. Guys, lemafreya means you have to make Berachos Hamazon. Now, where do you have to make it? We already learned it in Halacha Aleph. But always lachatchila, go back to the place, make Berachos Hamazon, and then v'choyzer mevarech batchila hamoitzi. Then you have to make a new bracha prior. V'acher kach, and only then may you conclude your meal. Guys, this is the rule. Kol hameshana mekaymai harei pasak achilasi. Remember that we learned this together in the Gemara. That's a simple rule. You were meshana your makom, which means you left under that roof. So if that's called the end of the meal, the rule is when you finish eating, the Torah says you got a bench. Midrabanan, even if you ate a kazayis, but you finished, you got a bench. You want to eat more, bench and make a new bracha rishayim. However, there is an exception. The exception will be that if a group of people are eating together, the concept of eating together, which is called kfiyah su'uda, is only shaykh by bread, meal, and by wine, and some people of the group remain behind. Then it's not called that you finished your meal. And the Yatsu is just giving an example. And most people of the group left, even for a mitzvah, because they went to greet a chassan, they went to greet a kala. As long as someone remained behind, the example of the Rambam is not only when it's an elderly person or someone who's ill. It's like the Gemara says, Diber hakasav bohaiva. Normally, who will remain behind? In this case, if there's a mitzvah to go lekras hachasen, Only someone who's unable to. But it doesn't matter. If there was an adult, that's not chayla. And for whatever reason, he didn't do the mitzvah of being mekabel the Pnei Chazan. If someone remained behind, since they began as a group, so here we say chayzrin l'mekaymam, everyone can return back to the place with goyim su'udasan, and they don't have to make another bracha. In other words, the kviyus was not nullified because of the one who remained behind. However, that's only because someone remained behind. But then kishehem yoitzim, the chiddush here is even though they went for a mitzvah, doesn't matter. The rule is the same. The rule is mishana makayim. You ended the meal. You ended the meal. You have to bench. You want to eat more? Save it. Make another bracha rishayna. Kishehem yoitzim tzricham l'bracha l'mafreya uchshem choyzrim tzricham bracha l'chatchila. He's telling you even better. The ideal is not make a bracha achrayna when you return. Now that you know this halacha, there's a chassan. I mean, you know this. It's a time question, but the real ideal, don't even leave. Make the bracha achrayna because you're going to have to do it anyways. And the rule is, like we began in halacha al, if you eat, you ended, make a bracha, make a bench. I am still hungry. The Torah is telling me, halacha is telling me that leaving my location means I'm ending my meal. I don't care if I'm doing it for a mitzvah. Halacha hey, gavaldik. People are drinking together. The rule is always going to be the same, that when you leaving your location ended that eating session. In other words, not only by birchas hamazon, it can be by ha'etz. Now all of that is because you left your location. How do you define location? So here the Rambam says very clear. The word bias means room, not a house the way we have in America with 80 rooms. If you changed your location in one home, in one room, and the ikar is, my friends, since the new location is in a place where you can see the old location, it's about to the iyah, ein tzarich lachzor levarach. But if you can't see, and look at the example he's giving. You have a fig tree, which has a very wide trunk. You began eating in one side of the tree. Now guys, I want you to know one thing. If lechatchila, when you began to eat in one location, you had in mind to move around, then this is not a problem. The Rambam doesn't speak about that. But if I'm eating a meal under the fig tree, even if I go to the other side of the fig tree where my new location does not allow me to visually see my original location, that's called shinu makim. Wow. So people in America that are walking with their hydration cups, not to get dehydrated the whole time. Again, when they make a shahakol, they have to have in mind lechatchila that they're going to be sipping it. Malas geta. Some people, some creatures eat the whole time. But if you don't have that in mind, you have a problem. Halacha vav. Berach halapas. Now we're beginning the other topic of this chapter. Like we mentioned, certain brachas, when you make one, it covers other brachas. So if a person makes a bracha on bread, he makes the hamoitzi, patar es ha-parperes, oichlin es behen ha-pahas. Parperes refers to appetizers. I know that this is not a perfect translation. Parperes means that all of the food that are being consumed, because you're having a meal, it doesn't only mean you're having it with the bread. That's the key. Parperes literally means something with it. But any food, which is the meal, you're having it because you're having a su'udah, like, this is an example. Memini ha-tafshel. Other types of cooked foods, or even fruit, right? A side dish, thank you, but a side dish that is eaten only when you have a meal, not side dishes that you eat outside the meal. They are covered. You don't have to make a bracha prior nor a bracha post. But if you make first a bracha on all of these side dishes, appetizers, and the key, my friends, is that's the lashon of Chazal. That pas is mezin. It offers nourishment. So whatever part of the meal is giving you the highest level of nourishment, look how things change today. People view bread as the enemy. Because I'm not healthy, it's going to make me feel not good. Bread gives you the nourishment. So that's the key. You make it on what nourishes you more. It includes that which is secondary because it nourishes you less. Berach al maisa kedera. That will include, not only because of hamaitzi. If you made a bracha on cooked grains. Now what did we learn? We learned in Shabbos, you make normally a mezainis. Anything that you eat in this meal because it's accompanying the maisa kedera, According to the Rambam, you don't have to make a bracha. Because you make a bracha, you're sitting down to eat what nourishes you here and what's considered secondary to it. Okay, halacha zayin. Just to repeat what we said yesterday, very importantly, when we began the series, it's just, always, we don't paskin like the Rambam. So especially by brachas, and it's so complicated that Alter Rebbe wrote 3 times, Birchas Hanehenen. He wrote twice Birchas Hanehenen, then he wrote the Siddur. It's gavaldik for learning Rambam, but don't paskin by the Rambam. And Zelik began to ask questions. All of these questions, Pashad, nuanced, takes a lot of time to answer, even if a person knows the answer. Let's just learn the Rambam. Halacha 7. Gomar belibim la'echel. So we learned if you left your location, not leaving location. I decided not to continue eating. The Rambam says eat until you're 3/4 full. This person is only 50% full. But one decided, that's it. Or if you gather to drink wine, and you decided that was enough, you made such a resolve, and this is all in your heart. And God knows what's in your heart. And after you decided the meal is over, you changed your mind. Here says the Rambam, which also automatically ends the meal. It's called Hesach Hadas. Your resolve, no more meal, that ended the meal. But here it's different than moving your place. When you move your place, what did the Rambam say? You have to make a bracha achrayna, right? And then you have to make a bracha rishayna. Guys, halt cup over here. Hesech hadas, if you stayed in your location, you only have to make a new bracha prior. I know the Rambam does not spell it out explicitly, but that's the psak of the Rambam. It's called Hesech hadas. Since you did not leave your makom, is not strong enough to oblige you to make a bracha achrayna. But you'll have to make another bracha rishayna. Good. Now, but on the other hand, if you are eating and you did not decide to finish eating, even if you are overeating, not the way that Rambam says in Hilchos Deis, even if the person says afilu pasach kol hayoim, you don't have to make a new bracha rishayna. But guys, the Rambam is relying on a few things. I'll just repeat. Number 1, that the food did not yet get digested. That you did not make a shinui makom. But in other words, if a person is sitting around their table on Yom Tiv, and they're eating and they're nashing, so they're constantly eating, then as long as they didn't have in mind to end the meal, time is not a factor when the food was not digested. Halacha 8. Now, if people were drinking, the Rambam is giving this as an example because it was common for people to after they finished eating the meal part, the bread part, they would continue to drink together. At some point they said, come, let's bench. Or he gives another example. If a person is having a meal Friday, aside of all of the questions in halacha, are you allowed to make a meal? But they may have had a meal on Friday. They began before their permitted time. It was put in at a Shabbos, or whenever the scenario was. So the rule is like this. Once it comes Shkia, you have to stop the meal. You don't have to daven ma'ariv. You have to cover the bread and you have to make Kiddush. And not only that, you can make Kiddush prior to Shkia. So once they said, let us make Kiddush, now Nesar Aleim Lishtais Achi Yivarcho Yikadesh. Now that's it, that ended the meal. But if they're going to do it nonetheless, even though they're not allowed to, like once you decided to make Kiddush, you have to make Kiddush. But taking that aside, mamish like halacha zayin, unlike the beginning of this Perek, the resolve to end the meal, which is called the Hesach Hadas, obligates you to make a bracha rishayna again, but it doesn't obligate you to make a bracha achrayna and a bracha rishayna. If they decide to make Havdalah, that is not even called a Hesach Hadas. And the logic is very simple. That one is obligated when Shabbos comes in. If you're having a meal out of Shabbos into Shabbos, by Shkia, you have to stop and make Kiddush. When a person is having a meal at the end of Shabbos, Shalosh Shudas, and they go into night, they don't have to stop. L'chatchila. So therefore, Boyev and Navdil, since you're not mechuyev, is not such a great break. So here, we're speaking dafka about people that are drinking in a chabura. Okay, this is very important. The bracha that we're going to be learning about, Atoiv Meitiv, is not said if you drink wine by yourself. Hoyim Mesubin, people are gathered to drink wine, and they made the bracha by the Priyagafen. But now, ubalahem mean yain achar, another type of wine came, very important, not a better wine, has nothing to do with a better wine. Another min yain. Kegoin, they were drinking red wine, and now they bring black wine. They were drinking old wine, which is superior, and they bring newer wine, which is inferior. The Rambam gives that bedafka. Even though because they are sitting together, they made once the bracha by the Pri Hagafen. Aval mevarchim baruch ato Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hatoiv v'hameitiv. Hatoiv means hatoiv for me, v'hameitiv la'achedim.
Is this different than other opinions? You say it has to be a better one.
I think so. No, the Rambam clearly paskins it's about ribu yayin, meaning about another type. Now another type, also there's details like there's Merlot and Cabernet in the Grosse Weinschmecker. L'chayr or not, because it's red. The Rambam's examples are if it's substantially a different color. That's what he's saying. Or old versus new, because it's a complete different quality. At kedei kach. Even going down in Madrega. Halacha yud. Ein mevachen al oichel min kol oicholin v'lei mashkin kol mashkin. A rule: you may not make a bracha only until the food is right in front of you. We'll see the big exception when you make a bracha over water in front of a river. Because the bracha, the water that was in front of you is no longer here when you drink it. But normally it has to be lefanov. It's at kedei kach. This is b'di'evet. This is ma'akiv. And you knew they're bringing it. You knew it. But you made the bracha prior and you were not meisach das and you didn't speak out. Doesn't matter. You got to make a bracha again. What happens more? You took it in your hand and then it fell from your hand. Right? And it got burned, because if it fell from your hand and it's still there, pick it up. As long as there's no COVID, pick it up and eat it. He's not speaking of the hygiene. But it's no longer here, or it fell into the river and the river swept it away. So you know what you got to do, guys? You have to make a new bracha rishona. Even if it's the same type. And not only that, again, Rambam, who holds that making a bracha levatala is like taking Shem Shemaim levatala, God forbid. So to rectify that, you have to say, which is what we do whenever you say God's name. In vain, Baruch Shem, Kevoid Malchus Elo'elam Va'ed. Al bracha rishona. Don't forget that Rambam in Kihilchas Kriya Shema never mentioned that Baruch Shem was a tefillah of Malachim, and Moshe Rabbeinu took it from there. He never mentioned that. The Rambam says the only reason why the undertone, Yaakov Avinu said it. The undertone is because since Moshe Rabbeinu didn't write it in the Torah, in the context of the Shema, that's why before you say, you have to say it low, because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say it. Which means there's no problem saying Baruch Shem loud. B'chlal, during the year, say it. And praising God's name after God's name is mentioned resolves this, Yiras Hashem HaNichbad Hanoiri. You're not respectful. No, you said God's name and you said Baruch Shem.
What he said in Perek Aleph, I think it was, that it's like a Shua Shav. That's only if you don't rectify. Only if you don't rectify.
Here the Rambam introduces the rectification. Thank you. The exception is you can stand by a stream of water and you can make a bracha and you can drink, even though you have no keli, which means the water that was in front of you is no longer here. That's the exception. Now you can't say when the steak is still in the kitchen, I'm going to make a shahaka loud for whoever's serving me to hear the bracha and come and jump. No, that doesn't matter. By water they made the exception. Halacha Yudalef. Not only are they being brought during the meal, but they are eaten because of the meal. According to the Rambam, any type of snack that people eat outside meals will automatically not be included. It's being brought, but because of the meal. Then, not before, not after. And the birchas hamoitzi shebatchila preteres hakol shehakol tefelo l'seuda. However, udvarim she'eina machmas ha'seuda, if they happen to be brought during the meal, right? And now there's a frequency involved. Don't think that no one ever ate anything outside a meal. The Rama means like peiros, which are frequently eaten outside a meal. Then, tu'unim bracha lifneim. We don't paskin this way, we know that. You have to always make a bracha prior to it, and not la'achareyem. Okay? This is not speaking about dessert. This is speaking about something that's being brought connected to the meal. If this is frequently eaten outside the meal, you got to make a new bracha. We're not speaking about something that you're eating with the bread, but it's being brought during mealtime. Now, what does that mean? After people decided no more bread, that's the meaning. Bread was eaten throughout. It was a different way of eating. So after there was what's called mashcha yudeim menapas, and then food is brought, bein machmas ha'seuda, bein shalei machmas ha'seuda. Whether it's food, machmas ha'seuda means food that's being brought to be mazen, to give you nourishment. Whether shaloi machmas ha'seuda means food that doesn't have nutritional value, but it's being brought like what we call a dessert or a snack, no matter what. To una bracha, listen to how the Rambam paskins. L'fneihem v'la achareim. Final halacha yud beis b'shavasas b'yom tovim. Or when a person has a meal after they let blood. After bloodletting, these are all times where people would drink wine after the meal. U'b'shashiyot min hamerchatz. That what? In other words, that after having bread, su'udah is bread. It's common that people would continue for a while to consume more wine. So the question is, do you have to make a bracha over that wine? See, there's wine during the meal, wine prior to the meal. Wine during the meal, we learned, was consumed in order to help your body digest the food. Even though you have to make a bracha for that wine, it does not cover the wine that you will drink after the meal. If you drink wine before the meal, like by Kiddush, that's good. That was not to help you digest. Then since you didn't bench yet, the wine that you have during the meal and after the meal is covered. Before you make Berachos Hamazon, but on other days, oh, a second. But it's covered. Why is it covered? Because you knew from the outset that you will be drinking wine after the meal. But on other days, even if you made a bracha of a wine prior to the meal, since you didn't know that you're going to continue to drink after the meal, then you have to make another bracha should you choose to drink wine afterwards. It's about the kavanah that you had when you made the bracha over wine. If you thought that's all the wine you're drinking, then you have to make another bracha. When wine is brought during the meal, that's a separate halacha about whether I can make a bracha for you. So when we're having haseva, we're eating together, I can make a bracha for you. Wine that's consumed during the meal and if no one made a hagafen yet, they brought wine, I'm making and you're making, everyone has to make their own bracha. Don't forget that saying amen while I'm eating is dangerous. So therefore, automatically, everyone, while they're eating, everyone should make their own bracha. Amen, people's throat is not, so to say, available to answer amen. And another rule is, aside of you making a bracha on the wine that you're eating while you're having the meal, since that drinking of the wine is not called wine drinking, it's called something that's being done to help you digest it, it doesn't cover the wine that you will then choose to eat after the meal, even if you had that kavanah. Shabbos and Yom Tov, everyone has to make Kiddush, so you don't have a problem. Okay, Perek Chamishi is the Perek about Zimun. The whole chapter is about Zimun. Perek Chamishi has 17 halachas, starting with halacha Aleph. Nashim va'avadim chayavim b'Berachos Hamazon. This is all an intro. Now, there's a big machlokes. Why a woman obligated? Is it midoraisa or midrabanan? Why would you say so? So why not? It's a positive commandment. It's not time bound. Whenever you eat, you have to bench. The Rambam doesn't give the reason, but the Gemara says, because since we say al ha'aretz ha'toiva asher nosan loch and v'lenitna ha'aretz, right, lebanois lenachla. I know there are exceptions, the benois tzolafchad, but in principle, Yerusha goes through the sons. So that will be a reason why many opine that they're not obligated. Not midoraisa. They're for sure obligated midrabanan. And it's a big nafkamina, as we'll see in a moment. Now, lefikach, therefore, ein moitziin es hagdolim yedei chayvasan. As we learned in Perek Aleph, halacha Yud Aleph, that for me to make a bracha for you, we have to have the same level of obligation. Women and men do not have the same level of obligation, but as we'll see in a moment, that Rambam himself will speak about a scenario that if a man did not eat kedei seviyah, the man only ate a kazayas, he's also chayiv midrabanan. There they are on the same level, which is a chiddush. In other words, we don't say that by women it's like a double midrabanan, because b'chlal they only have to bench midrabanan, and then they only ate a kazayas. That we don't say. If both chiyuvim are midrabanan, then one could exempt the other. Avol haktanim chayavim bebirchas hamazon midivrei soifrim. In other words, vaday loy midoiraisa. That's the key. Vaday not midoiraisa. It's not even a doubt. And then why are they obligated? Kadei lachancham b'mitzvos. Halacha beis. Now,
Isn't that the case with all katanim in every mitzvah?
for sure. Yeah. But the Rambam is trying to emphasize is that even though chinuch is an obligation on the father, that's the unique shita. Rambam, he almost always, other than in tefillin, includes the katan in the chiyuv. He doesn't say that aviv chayiv lechanchoi. His words are always ktanim chayavim. We have the same expression by tzitzis. There's a big chiddush over here. Ilkut Sichas Chelik Yud Zayin Kedoshim Daled explains this concept that since the father can only fulfill the obligation by the son doing, so he becomes included in the obligation. So at kedei kach that the Rambam always uses the words that they are chayavim. There's consequence to that in halacha. Halacha base. Shloisha she'achlu paska echad. Now let's go. 3 people ate bread together. Chayavim, they are obligated to bench hazimun prior to birchas hamazon. Herst. Birchas hazimun is, you can just say it's just a back and forth a little bit. No, that's called birchas hazimun. What's birchas hazimun? So like this, if there were only 3 up until 10, v'loy ad b'chlal, so then one of them will lead and will say, nevarech she'achalnu mishaloi, and everyone responds, baruch she'achalnu mishaloi v'tuvechayinu. And then he, the leader, the one who is mizamein, is going to say, baruch she'achalnu mishaloi v'tuvechayinu. Not the way we do it. And only afterwards do you bench. But in the times of the Rambam, when people would do zimun, one would bench for all. V'achar kach omer, the one, right, who was mizamein, will be the one saying, Baruch ato Hashem Elokeinu melech olam azonos olam kol b'tuvay at shegomer arba brachos v'hein oinen amen acher kol bracha ubracha. Really, the Rambam already established that they don't have to answer amen. Shomeya ka'ena here is even without amen. But even better, when you say amen, schorei gadol yoser, as the Rambam says. Halacha dalat. If there are 10 people and more, then the zimun is done, but they add God Almighty's holy name. Ketzad hamavarech chaymen nevarech lelokeinu shechal mishaloi v'heimoimim baruch elokeinu shechal mishaloi v'tuvechayinu. And then v'hu chayzer v'oimer baruch elokeinu shechal mishaloi v'tuvechayinu. And then the mevarech is maschel b'birchas hamazon. Halacha hey hasoid b'beis chasanim. Unlike what we learned yesterday over Shabbos regarding how long do you extend Sheva Brachas, 1 day or 7 days, here we're learning about something else. That in the Zimun there's a modification. And this modification goes way beyond Sheva Brachas, way beyond. Let's go prior. From when the family of the chassan, which customarily would prepare the meal, the su'udah, from when they already began to prepare the tzarchi sudas and nisuin. Now really this is just a day prior, that had no refrigeration. From then until 30 days after the marriage, whenever people gather, this is whether there's going to be, like the Rambam says, whether you're going to add only the 7th bracha, because there's no panam chadashis le Rambam, and this can be after the week afterwards, where b'chlal, not even one bracha is being said. You're going to say, Nevarech sha'asimcha b'ma'oinoi. Right, bless the one in whose abode there is joy. Shechal mishaloi. And everyone answers, Baruch sha'asimcha b'ma'oinoi, shechal mishaloi, etc. And if there are 10 people, then you say, Nevarech lelokeinu sha'asimcha b'ma'oinoi, shechal mishaloi. Now, we never heard the words, Nevarech sha'asimcha b'ma'oinoi. We never heard that, because if we don't have a minyan, we only say this when the Sheva Brachas. And if there's no minyan b'chlal, you don't make Sheva Brachas. But there's nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do with whether you're saying Sheva Brachas. It's more than 30 days in a moment, you'll see. If there's 10, then you say Nevarech lelokeinu sha'asimcha b'ma'oinoi shechal mishaloi, v'heinoimnim baruch elokeinu sha'asimcha, etc. Now the Rambam says that's always during 30 days after the wedding. Any meal that's made because of the young married couple after 30 days. If it's because of the married couple, until 1 full year, during the entire, what we call Shana Rishona, they would say, Sha'asimcha b'ma'oinoi. How great is that? Halacha 6. Hakol chayavim b'birchas hazimun. Everyone is obligated in a zimun just the way they're chayvim b'birchas hamazon. And afilu kehanim she'achlu kotche ha'kotchem ba'azara. The kotchem that the man's birchas hazimun is shiyarei menachas, which was commonly eaten. One might have thought, number one, that since it says v'yochal ta, one might have thought it means achilas reshus. Kamash v'lo, no, even by achilas mitzvah. Number two, according to some opinions, the Kohanim were not allowed to sit when they ate, because Ein Yoshvan Ba'Zara, only Malchus Beis David. And one would think, as we learned in today's first chapter, in Allah Perek Daled, you got to sit down Lachatchila. So you would think that since the whole benching is done, you ate standing, you're going to bench standing. No, you got to do that. V'chein, another din. Zimun, it means that everyone is partaking of the same meal. What happens if the food is a food which not everyone can eat of? So for example, Kohanim and Yisraelim that are eating together. Even if the Kohanim only ate Truma, and Yisraelim ate Chulin, which means that the Yisrael was not able to join the Kohanim. So let's argue they're not eating together. They are eating together. You know what? Because even though the Yisrael cannot eat Truma, the Kohen can eat Chulin. That's why. Chayavim bezimun kechiyuvim beberchas hamazon. Halacha zayin. Now let's go. Now that the Rambam says that whoever is chayiv in birchas hamazon is chayiv in zimun, the Rambam said that women are chayiv in birchas hamazon, whether they're rais or they're rabbanon. So does that mean they're chayiv in birchas hazimun? Nashim va'avadim uketanim. There's a side rule that they may not be mitzadef to the three, or they can't be combined, so they're not included. Avol mizamnan la'atzman. You have three women eating together, they make zimun. Now, why is that? First of all, we don't include men and women together. Now, even when it comes to nashim, avadim, and kantanim, we don't even include them together. Don't make a group because of pritzus. But nashim mizamnois la'atzman, avadim la'atzman. Ubovad sheloi yizamnu b'shem, and we'll see in a moment. Danny is speaking about the chiddush of the Rambam that cotton is chayiv according to the Rambam, like we learned by Kriyas HaTorah about the cotton reading. Cotton can be part of the three. Let's rewrite it. Androgynous and androgynous. Just another detail that women, when they are mizaman la'atzman, they'll never use God's name. Using God's name demands a quorum of 10 males, 13 or over. So there'll never be a zimun b'shem by Nasha. But they're chayv to make a zimun according to the Rambam when they do, because they're chayv and birchas hamaz. And whoever's chayv and birchas hamaz is chayv to make a zimun. Androgynous, which is someone who has the physical characteristics of both genders, they make a zimun amongst themselves, but they may not be included, not in women and not in men. And a tumtum can never join together, because if you have three tumtums, maybe two of them are men, one of them is a woman. You don't know whether androgynous is considered the same gender, so they can make it by together. They can't join women, maybe they're men. They can't join men because maybe they're women. Now, koton chevre, not when they're mufla hasamach leish 12. That's a 6-year-old. Some kids even younger. The Rambam paskins mizamnin olav, he could be included. V'afal pishu, that he's only keben sheva. We already said. Right, remember when we learned Hilchas Talmud Torah that the Rambam's Keben Sheva means what we call he turned 6. Because when you turn 6, you enter the 7th year, or maybe you have to enter the 8th year. Umitztarif, not only for 3, Bein Leminyan Shloisha, Bein Leminyan Asara L'Zaman Olav. Even nowadays, many times the Alter Rebbe says, don't make a macha, that if you need a minyan and the 10th is a cotton, some people that you're saying here, one minor, he's 6 years old. He's included in the minyan. But the hanachri yem mizamen and olav. Halacha ches. Ein mizamen and ella al misha achal kazayis pasol amayla. To be included, you have to have a kazayis of bread, which means you're chayiv at least midrabanan to bench. Shiva she'achlu pas. 3 of the 10 ate yerek oitzir. They ate something, even something that only demanded a shahakoil, which is tzir, or hadama, which only has the after bracha of vayra nefashos, or chayotze behen. Since you have a ruba, the minkar 7 mitztaref lezamen b'shem. But the leader has to be someone who ate bread. Avol, if it's 6 when it comes to the minyan, 6 is enough. You got a roif, not for here. Avol shisha she'ochlu pas v'arba yerek mitztarfen achiyo ochli apas. It's called a roif haniked, a distinct majority or a discernible majority, which is only when you have 7. That not everyone has to eat bread. The following line, again, we don't paskin what we're going to learn right now. The Rambam paskins, but when it comes to 3 people, all 3 of them needed to eat a kazayis pas in order for them to combine to the zimun. Halacha number 9, shnaim she'ochlav gamram la'echol. 2 people ate and they completed the meal. And now a 3rd person comes and eats with them, but these first 2 are not eating. So like this. Im yecholim la'echol imoy kol shehu. Yecholim la'echol imoy halachically means that they ended the meal prior to being full. They chose not to be stuffed, but ein bitna mole. If their stomachs are full, we're going to learn about this when it comes to eating the Korban Pesach. If I'm eating when I'm already full, it's not even called eating. That's why if you're stuffed and you have achila gasa, you're not even yoytza the Korban Pesach. So I ended eating. We learned in Perek Dalad, right, about I made hesach hadas, for me the meal was over. But since my stomach is not full, and a third person came, even if even a little bit, and not even bread will be too heavy, then it's considered the three ate together.
You have to make it a bracha rishana?
No, they don't even have to eat. It has to be yecholim le'echol.
Able to eat.
You have to be able to eat. Now, finish. That's the rule. According to the Rambam, Chacham Gadol, who is going to be the one leading the benching? The Chacham Gadol Shema Masubin, who Shema Barach Lekulam. Many cases, by the time they find out who's the biggest Gadol, the food digested. Another din that Rambam doesn't say it over here, that the Chacham Gadol can be mechabat someone else. Halacha Yud Shloisha Shachlu Ke'echad. Whoever thinks they're the big Chacham should say, okay, I'm a vater. I allow you to bench. So everyone will be happy. Shloisha Ke'echad. Now that three people are eating together doesn't mean in the same room. Now there are exceptions. Sometimes when you go to a wedding, there you combine people from one table to the other because they are all there for the same reason. But if you go to a restaurant, if you're not around the same table, you're not joined. You can't just join the other table. No. So now three people that are eating together, since they are chayiv to make a zimun, they're not allowed to, let me go with my neighbor's table. That can happen in a restaurant because of it. Now, your neighbor is sitting with his wife and kids, but you're not mitzadef anoshim iktanim. You're not allowed to leave. The chein arba, or you have 4 people or 5 people, but 6 people. Yesh lahem lichalek adasara. Lichalek means 3 and 3. In other words, if you're moving away, won't take away the chiyuv of the group from where you came from, nor will you be exempt because you're going to a group in which there'll be a zimun, so they just separated. Now that we learned dinim and Perek Revi, going away doesn't mean leaving the room. It means they're going mipina lepina ba'oisa bayis. That's okay, because they didn't change the obligation. And similarly, the same thing with 10. The moment you have 10, you got to say Elokeinu. If one person, even if 3 go away, you can have a group of 6 and a group of 3. I'm sorry, 4 and 3, 7 and 3. You can't say God's name. So until you have 20 people, you can't break up. And when you break up from 20, it has to be 10-10, not 11-9, because then the group of 9 lowered their obligation. Then Again, l'cholik, clearly, the Rambam is expecting for us to remember, Perek Revi, l'cholik doesn't mean they can leave another room, because the chatchila, like we said, you got to bench in the place that you ate. Place of the ate doesn't mean around the same table, it means in a place where you can see the place that you ate. Halacha Yud Aleph. Shloisha b'nei Adam. Shabolo m'sholosh chabure shel shloisha. So here you go, guys. 3, let me go back to my case. There's a big dining hall, Pat's, Chveis, Shiloh's. You're going to a restaurant, and there were 3 tables. And everyone sat in a different group. They, for right or for wrong, let's say every group had 4 people. Let's go like that. So when they leave, at least they didn't break the group where they came from. And these 3, each one was mechuyev to make a zimun, come and sat together. They didn't eat together. Since they came from a chiyuv, they can bench together. One second. Not only can they bench together, they're obligated to bench together with zimun. Since they're obligated, they cannot break up. You got it? No, they can't say, we never ate the meal together. Since you came from a group of 3 or more, and you didn't bench over there was no zimun there, so the chiyuv of zimun is chal on these 3 people. Even though they didn't eat together, they can't break up. But the im kvar zimun kol echad echad b'chabura shaloi, but it happens very often. As the Rambam will speak some cases, when 3 people are eating together, 1 person can lead the zimun. All we need to do is we have to listen to the first bracha aloud and answer Hazanas HaKoil Amen, and you can go back to eating. So if they already fulfilled their obligation, and then they left and they joined together, then they're not obligated to make a zimun, even though it's a new group. No, they never ate together. They're just sitting together now, and they were already exempted of the zimun. They're not exempted from benching, but they were exempted of the zimun. And that's even if they ate after they joined together. Even if they ate when they joined together, because since they are only continuing their meal and they were yoytze the zimun, they're not mechuyev to make a new zimun. So them breaking up is not exempting themselves from an obligation that never existed. 3 people that sat down to eat bread, even though everyone is having their own bread, and guys, that's the nakuda. What makes a group a group? The words of Chazal is ein hapas mitztaref. It's not because you're eating out of the same loaf of bread. It's the fact that they ate on the same table. So if everyone brings their own food, the fact that we ate together, it's called kviyusan, was mitzvah of them. Halacha Yud Beis. Now here, we're speaking about the example of a wedding call, not a wedding call. People are eating together. No, a wedding call. People are eating in the same room, not in pets. See, in pets, one table is not connected to the other, because everyone is there for our own reason. But if people are joining together for the same purpose, like a chasana today, and now you have different tables. I'm eating on table 2, you're eating on table 1. But you have to add that nuance, but they came for the same reason. So they all can combine as long as they can see each other. Do they all have to see each other? No, only some of them. So you have a little table, on every table there's a couple, on every table there's a family. But you have in the room, you have 10 tables or more, you have 10 men. You make a nevarach lalekenu. But the imlav, if they cannot see each other, even though they gather under the same roof for the same purpose, everyone makes their own zimun. So if there's 3 and 3, you can't say Elokeinu. But if there's one server, and the server is going and is being meshamish all of the groups, so the shamish, the waiter, is combining all of the groups together. Even if not even a little bit, it's an L-shaped room. Like a Pesach program, if there's the same shamash, it has to be under the same roof. That's important. It has to be b'bayis echad. As long as they can hear each other. Means because don't forget, once you made a zimun, you would bench loud. Everyone else would listen. You have to hear the zimun. You have to hear Berachos Chapters. And v'hu sheyishmu shteim kol divrei mevarach b'beir. Halacha Yud Gimel. Shloisha she'achlu v'yotza echad mem lashuk. 3 people are eating together, and wrongfully one person walked out. You can only do zimun when he comes back. The question here is, does he have to actually enter the room, or does he have to come close enough that you can see him and he can hear? And the latter is okay. All you have to call him back. Not that he has to come sit down. Just kadesh yechaven lishmoya masha. He has to come close enough for him to be able to hear what they're saying. Even though he's still outdoors. V'hu bashuk. The yoytze yedei chavasi. Means this one guy fulfilled the zimun, and then when he goes back home, as we learned in Perek Dalet, go back to where you ate, then he can make Berachos Hamazon la'atzmai, which is a chiddush, because normally when there is zimun, only the mevarech bench the whole thing out loud. But if you have 10 people, it's not good enough. By 10 people, you say God's name. God's holy name should only be said when 10 men are together under the same roof, not one guy standing outside. But that's not because of the din of zimun. That's the din of being machabed God's name. Halacha Yudalat. 3 people ate together. One guy benched. He already benched. You know what? If he's still there, the other 2 can do zimun after he benched. The 2 people will be yoytze the chayv of zimun, but he lost the zimun. He did Berachos Hamazon, but you know it's she'ein zimun lemafreya. So it's amazing. He benched, but since he's still there, he's still included because they ate together. Halacha tezvav, shnayim she'achlu ke'echad. 2 people ate together, then everyone benches for themselves. Oh, but only if one person doesn't know how to bench do we then say that the one who knows should bench loud, the other one should answer amen and fulfill his obligation. In other words, if it's 2 people, one should not bench for the other if the other knows how to bench. Masha Enkein by Zimun, Bisman Harambam, and even a bit later, Dafka 1 for everyone. And the Alter Rebbe already writes in his times that since people don't have the capacity of having kavanah to listen from the beginning until the end, at somean else who's reading the benching, me looking and reading helps me direct my intention. So nowadays, everyone benches for themselves. But ideally, when there is zimun, even though everyone knows how to bench, only the mezaman should be the bencher, uben. Mevarach la'aviv, that means if the father doesn't know, this is a hemshech, and the son knows. Guys, you're going to jump and ask, whoa, the son was only chayiv midrabanan. So yeah. We're speaking about the father who did not eat kedei seviyah, but he ate a kazayas. And since the Rambam holds that chinuch is machayiv the cotton, so the cotton is chayiv as the father is chayiv. So ben mevarach la'aviv, and eved mevarach la'nabai, isha mevarachas la'bayla, if they don't know how to bench. Again, we're speaking, this is not about zimun. This is about when two people are eating together. So that case where the father doesn't know how to bench, and who's leading the benching? His son. May a curse befall a person who doesn't know how to bench and is relying on a minor, on an isha. In other words, you're saying bein mevarach la'aviv? And even an isha, even though isha might be chayiv d'oraisa, she might only be chayiv midrabanan. So for you to say it works is only if the male adult is not chayiv d'oraisa. And guys, appreciate the chiddush. If a gadol ate kezayis, he's mechuyev midoraisa to bench. Just elamah, he didn't eat enough. When it comes to the cotton, the whole chiyuv is only a chinuch. It's only the rabbanan chiyuv. And not only that, the cotton doesn't have to eat kedei sviyah. The cotton also only ate a kazayis. Like you might have argued, it's like a double the rabbanan. We don't say that. The cotton could be mevarach la'aviv. Aval l'machal v'sava, but if the adult ate and was satisfied, and therefore he's chayv to bench minat Torah, then ben isha, ben cotton, oy eved, ein moitzi in oisan, because of the klal, shekol hachayv v'davim minat Torah, ein moitzi in oisan midei chayvasan, elo hachayv v'oisa davim minat Torah k'moisoi. And by the way, the same will be with two adults. That if one adult ate kedei sviyah, the other adult ate only a kazayas, the one who ate a kazayas may not bench loud for the one who ate kedei seviyah. Final halacha yud zayin. Hanichnas eitzel achedim, when you entered an environment and they are already leading the benching, you did not eat, you have to respond. We'll see what. That's where we're up to. Then he says, Baruch hu u'mevayrach. Even later, the others already responded, then at least you should answer Amen and not be silent, even though that you're not included in the zimun. Because God is being blessed, you got to answer.
You're not supposed to say the words.
No. We have in our benches exactly what we say. Perek Chavre, the final chapter of today, Perek Shishi, Machaya. Perek Shishi has 20 halachas. It's a big chapter today. It's all about Netilas Yadayim. And that's why Zelig, you were asking before about Netilas Yadayim, is let's keep it organized the way that Rambam does it. And of course, it's connected to Hamoitzi, but now we're learning a standalone Perek for Netilas Yadayim. Halacha number 1, Kol ha'oichel pas, whenever you eat bread, upon which you make Hamoitzi. Guys, we learned over Shabbos, sometimes you make a mezonos, right? But whenever you make a Hamoitzi, Tzarech Netilas Yadayim Tchila v'soif. Look how the Rambam words it. You got to wash your hands prior and post. My machronim. But the Rambam begins by putting it in the same level. Beginning and the end. And even though your hands are not dirty, nor do you know that they are tamei, both of your hands have to be washed. Furthermore, says the Rambam, v'chein kol davar, any food shetibule b'mashkin, that's dipped in liquid or was washed in liquid and is now wet, you must wash your hands prior. Says Tosfos, just to know that's only really when you are eating holy food, because the rule midrabanan is that if my hands, even if they're only tamei on the rabbinic sheni, Shniyos is on the person, on the hands as midrabanan, but there's another chumrah that a sheni makes mashkin et chila. A mashkin yadani, so the liquid becomes a rishon. A liquid can even be metame chulin into a sheni. The Rambam says you make a proper netilas yadayim with a bracha. Okay, we don't paskin this way. We wash our hands without a bracha, and we specially do that the night of the Seder. But according to the Rambam, anytime you eat even non-consecrated foods, if the food is wet, you're obligated to do netilas yadayim. Halacha beis. Kol hanotel yadav bein lachila bein l'kriyas shema bein l'tefila. Let's not forget also, Shitas Rambam is not like what we just wash our hands until Netilas Yadayim in the morning for Shachris. The Rambam would wash Netilas Yadayim also for Mincha and also for Ma'ariv. And the Rambam, when you wash your hands, you make a bracha al Netilas Yadayim. Always, you make the bracha Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvos v'tzivonu al Netilas Yadayim. By the way, if a person goes to the bathroom, you're also chayv to do Netilas Yadayim. And the way that Rambam would do it is, since you have to make a bracha, you wash your hands, you make al Netilas Yadayim. You would make an Asher Yotzar, and then you would make a Hamoitzi. Okay, but let's go over here. Just the word Netila, just to know what the word means. Natla, let's go one approach. The word Natla is a name of a small utensil. It was a typical utensil that had in it the capacity of holding the revias of water or more. So since you have to throw the water, B'koyach hanoisein, not B'koyach adam, B'koyach hanoisein, as we'll learn about this more detail soon. So therefore, to remember that, don't put your hands under the stream. We call it netilas yadayim. Use a natla, use a vessel, use a shisel in Yiddish. Shazu mitzvahs chachamim. Now the question is, how can you say God Almighty did not make such a mitzvah not before tefillah, not before kriya shema, not before you eat bread? It's netilas yadayim is one of the two takonas of King Solomon. Shazu mitzvahs chachamim shenetztavinu men atoyda lishmoyim. God commanded us to listen to the chachamim, as it says in Parsha Shoftim al pi atoyda asher yerucha. That's why it justifies to say asher kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav. And yes, you, God Almighty, commanded us to listen to the chachamim who made this takana. Umayim achroinim. However, mayim achroinim ein mevarchin aleim. Why not? It's a rabbinic decree that Rambam puts it together. She'enum elo b'pnei hasakana. Because the reason why the Chachamim made this decree, according to the Rambam, is primarily because of danger. Certain salts, known as melach sodoimis, or similar salts, if they made them their way into one's eyes, they can make a person blind. So therefore, you have to wash your fingers at the end of the meal to wash off the salt. And anything that was enacted because of sakana does not come with a bracha. You make a bracha putting up a maika. That's the whole sikh of the Rebbe on that. There's two aspects of it. It's also kadei shelo yipol hanoifel mimenu. But there's a side of that, a mitzvah of putting up a maika, standalone. Ulefikach chayiv adam lizar b'miyosef. But since the Chachamim made it because of a sakana, so don't take it lightly. You don't make a bracha. There's a rule in halacha: chamira sakanta mi'isura. Chamira sakanta mi'isura has many consequences. I'll give you just an example. If you have a suffix, whether you did a derabanan, their general rule is suffix derabanan lahakel. If it's a suffix, whether you did something that has a danger aspect, you have to do it again. Chamira sakanta mi'isura. Don't minimize mayim achreinim. Now I'll pick Kabbalah. There is other inyanim regarding mayim achreinim, but let's move on. Halacha gimel. Netilas yadayim. Ben tafshel latafshel. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but there's something called mayim emtsoim. All right, the Rosh, for example, would wash his hands during a meal between the fish and the meat because there's also a sakana to mix them. Our minig is no longer to do mayim emtsoim, but just to be familiar with the concept. Reshus ratza noitel ratza eno noitel. Now another din. Upeiroi shel chulen einon tzrichem netilas yadayim bein batchila bein basoif. If they are not wet, it's only for a meal. Even though, my friends, when the kohanim would eat truma, no difference whether they're eating meat or not. And the whole netilas yadayim of King Solomon was for the kohanim to make sure that they wash their hands. Fine. But not for when we eat chul and the kapetis and adarab, whoever does that, sometimes, you're being machmir. Wow, sometimes feh. You're called arrogant. We're speaking about netilas yadayim. If a person's hands is dirty, of course they should wash their hands, but that has nothing to do with netilas yadayim. As the Rambam spoke, it's not about taking dirt, it's about the ruchniistic idea of taking away too much niyos from your hands. Kol, there's different versions. Let's read these words. Kol pas shahamelach boy, which means whenever bread is eaten with salt. Now he's going to go into more details. That is where tzarech netilas yadayim achreinim. You have to wash the mayim achreinim. Shema yesh by melach sodoimis. Or melach that is like melach sodoimis, which means that if that salt goes into your eyes, it can really damage your eyesight. In other words, it began because there is salt. Then they said, now anytime you have a su'udah, wash. Now the truth is you have to always have salt during a meal, but the Rambam Lochayt is trying to say even if you know there was no salt, it doesn't matter. Now you got to do it. Now there's one exception. The exception of these, you see, the Rambam puts it together, Rishayna and Achrayna. prior and after the meal. Ubamachne, army camp, soldiers who are exempt of some mitzvahs that Rabbanon, they can eat damai. Peturim and atilas yodayim betchila. Bepneshim terudim b'mulchama. But they are still chayav b'achreina. That's another great example of chamira sakanta meisura. Bepnei asakana. Halacha dalid ad heichon in atilas yodayim. Until we're on the arm, do you have to wash your hands? Rambam used the words that are very not clear. Adapedek. We already spoke out that there's a three-way machlekes rishonim. The word pedek means a joint. Halachically, you have the joint, which is the middle of the fingers. The next joint is what separates the fingers from the palm. And then you have the wrist. We understand that Rambam means pedek until the wrist. V'kama shiramayim. Now here we go. Revi'is l'chol shtei yodayim. I want you to know that when you think about natilas yodayim right now, that we wash our own hands because I'm throwing water only on one hand. And then on the other hand, that's something unusual. According to the Rambam, natilas yadayim be'ikir is done by having the water poured by someone else on both of my hands together. Then he says, if you don't have an option, you can tilt it and put it in between your knees, or throw on one hand on the other. It's gewaldig. The chol shechoitzes and batfila, anything that creates a chatzitza, choitzes natilas yadayim. The chol ha'oil l'midas mikveh, like ice or snow. If it can be included in the 40 saw, it could be included in the shear of the revius. Don't forget, they had no running water. Sometimes it was special no water. If you have to kratz together a revius, if you have the snow, it can be included in. Halacha 5. Kol atzarech natilas yadayim. And instead of washing the hands with a natla, the koyach hanoisen, the person immersed one's hands in a kosher mikvah, that's good. By the way, you make another bracha. You say al tfilas yadayim. If you know that. Ein atzarech lavarachet. But that's only if the mikvah was kosher. But if the water was taka rainwater, it was not mayim she'uvim, but it didn't have the 40 saw, or it was what we call water that prior to it being gathered in the ground, it was previously put in a utensil, and from the keli it was brought into the ground. That's called mayim she'uvim. Lo yasa klum. No, it's when you do netilas yadayim. I don't care about all of the above, because you're putting it in a natla. And you're pouring it b'koyach hanoisen. But if you're going to use tefillah, it has to be a kosher mikvah. There are 4 rules. You have to be careful for the following. Number 1, b'mayim atzmam. There's halachas about the water, as the Rambam will explain. Rule number 2, ubashir. You have to have the minimum amount, like we mentioned. There has to be at least 1 revius for both hands. Number 3, there are halachas about the natla. Ubakeli, that sheyu hamayim shenitlim bekeli. It has to be a halacha keli. We'll see some things you might consider a keli. The Torah says it's not. And number 4, uba noitel. Uba noitel means that it has to come mikoyach hanoisen. As we'll give examples which will clarify each one of the 4. Shiomayim boy mikoyach hanoisen. Halacha zayin abo the bottom place hamayim. Let's go to rule number 1. Rule number 1 is called b'mayim atzban. Okay, let's dive into that. Shinoi mara, change of color. Or gilui, it was left uncovered. We'll speak about this in a moment. Vasiyas malachim, or if it was work to do any type of work. Or vehefsid shemoinea esabehem melishtes mehem. The quality of the water is so not good that even an animal won't drink from it. That water is not kosher. And the Rambam goes on further. Deeper. Ketzad. Mayim shenashtanu mara ison. If the water changes, whether they changed in a keli, whether they changed bekarkois, which means in a mikvah, whether it is because something else fell into it and changed the color, whether just the place it sits there long enough, look inside your neighbor's swimming pool, it looks green, once it turns completely colors. Number 2, if it was left uncovered, in which halachically you may not drink it, and on the times of Chazal, where Nechashem and Akrabim or Metzuyin, it's very limited amount of time that you are allowed to leave water that's uncovered. We paskin that nowadays there's no Gili Mayim so much. People are still very medagdik. I know people that don't even leave water in a urn. We don't go that far. Every day they put in no water and they plug it in. I saw these people, but we say it's covered. In other words, if there's going to be an issue of Gilui, you can't use it for Netilas Yadayim. Then Nifsalu, whenever there's a chashash that a venomous creature had the ability of getting in there just to drink. But the rule is that when a nachash drinks, not only do they steal your water, but then they poison it for you. That's their minik. Then there's going to be poison. So since you can't drink it, you can't use it for Netilas Yadayim. Halacha 8. Kol mayim shenasa b'hem malacha. If you did the work, he'll explain details of work. Nasu shoyfchim, halachically it's called sewage water. Even if the work really didn't make them dirty. Upsul Netilas Yadayim. For example, mayim she'uvim, shidich me'makelim. You had water, and you washed utensils. Oy sheshara b'hem pitoy, or you dipped your bread into it. See, you just dipped your bread into it. Uchayoytze b'hem. Whether it was in a keli, whether this is water gathered halachically in the ground that you call that a mikvah, psulim l'netilas yadayim, hidiach b'hem kelim mudachim. But if clean utensils were just rinsed again, or brand new kelim, that's the only time where we say, it's not about the quantity of dirt. They were not dirty to begin with. Then loy pisalan, because it's not called melacha. It's not about the dirt. It's called, did you do work? Did you do malach? If it was clean, it's not called malach. So the minig was they made crackers, and at some point they would dip the crackers into the water. That invalidates it. However, there were other times that the nachlaim would stick his hands into the water. He would cup his palms. He would remove the water and put it on top of those crackers. Even though his hands went into the water, he doesn't passel the water. It's not called malach in it. But then kishedim. Because shahamayim shebachafnav him shenasav mehem malacha. Avlamayim shechav mehem, but the water from where he took the water in his palms is not called malacha shenasav mehem malacha. No work was done with that water, even though he used that, he took from that water. Halacha 9. Any water that even a dog won't drink, it was very bitter. Right? Oy meluchim, it was very salty. Oy achunim, it was very murky, or it has a very bad odor. So it depends. If it's bekalim, psulim l'netilas yadayim. People are going to jump. They're going to say if an animal can't drink, it's not good. Until now, we made the correlation. Even if it's in the mikvah, it's good. The mikvah, Baruch Hashem, even if the mikvah is so bad that a dog won't drink from it, which is probably many mikvahs that I grew up in, it's still kosher for a mikvah. If it's kosher for a mikvah, you can do it until it's yadayim. Now, Chamei Teveria is very bitter. If it's b'mekayman, like we just mentioned, what's this psul of nifsalu mishasiya, even from an animal, Chamei Teveria. So since you can go to the mikvah and Chamei Teveria if they are in their natural place, then you can do tfilas yadayim. If you remove the water from it, you no longer can do it. If you took water into a natla, or you made a little canal, and you had the water go into another location, not in a way where that new location is still considered, there's a hashaka, not in that way. That's not good for a mikvah. The Rambam says. Don't forget, he begins everything together. Halacha Yud, like ocean water, very good, a great example. Ocean water will not be good because an animal does not drink ocean water, but in the Bekaiman it's good. That's the beauty. It means if you stick your hands in the ocean water, al tfilas yadayim 1,000% good. That's this psul, not good. Yeah.
What about if you put water out of the mikvah?
That's what I'm saying. That thank God that even though the mikvah waters, the mikvahs now are Aiden's mikvah will be drinkable water. You can stick it in, even though it's the real traditional mikvah waters. That after that you have to take 4 showers. It doesn't matter. It's good. Halacha Yud. One time. Yesh lanoitel litin al yodav ma'at achi yitin kashir. Look how the Rambam words it. Okay, today, Minik Chabad is Netilas Yadayim is 3 times. Really, in the times of what you learn more about is that it's once, and then they would throw water again to wash off the waters that are tummy, and it's metayed those waters. That's not lechatchila the way the Rambam understands Netilas Yadayim. Netilas Yadayim is like we mentioned; it's one pour of the whole revius on both hands together. If you want to pour it once and twice, that's okay. Yesh lenoitel little al yodav ma'at achi yitin kashir. But ve'im nasan al-revius kol b'shvicha achaz kosher. Noitlin another din. If you have many people that are putting their hands together. Now listen to this. Not only side by side. You have 5 people. Again, the way it worked is one person poured. So why should he pour and everyone separately? Have all of the 5 chevra, everyone putting their hands one above the other. which means the waters that came on my hands first that are not tahor are falling on the hands of the person beneath me. If it's being thrown at one time, all of our hands are considered one hand. And therefore it's kosher. Happens to be that every person needs a revius. But even though all of it is being thrown on the guy on top and it's trickling down. Noitlan arba chamisha. Not only zeh b'tzad zeh, even yad shel zeh al gabe zeh. With one pour. Now, obavad that the hand should be a little bit separated, because if I'm going to be pressing on your hand, then the waters cannot get in between. Ad sheyirapu yedayim, the hand should not be so pressed against each other, and we have to make sure that the water can get in between them. And another precondition, that there has to be a revius for each one separately. But if you had 4 revius in, which would be a shissel today, I think a shissel today probably has 10 revius in. It's a lot of water goes into our normal netilas yadayim cups. Have many people align their hands together and give one kanak and everything is good. It's called kulam nidoinus kiyad echad. Halacha yudalef ein noitlin mayim liyadayim. Ein noitlin mayim liyadayim. You may not use the following for netilas yadayim. Now we're learning dinim of kelim. Number 1, loy b'defanas hakelim. If a keli broke and you're using the wall of the keli, which is rounded, which could hold water, you can fill it up with water and throw it. And you can fit a revius of water in there. The wall of a keli is not called a keli. Or v'loy b'shulei hamachatz, that you would have some avars that in the bottom of the keli, simply in order for people to be able to chop it, to grab it, there would be a protrusion in the bottom. It means it would be a keli. Kevin is looking for a picture, and then you go around in the bottom. That's not called a keli. That's called the handle of the keli. So if all the water that you had was in that handle, it's not in a keli. V'loy b'charasim, any shard. In other words, if this was not made into a keli, it was an earthenware utensil, and the earthenware utensil cracked and broke. Again, you have any part of it, not only the doif and the wall, even the bottom, but it's a broken keli. This was not made for a keli. The covering of a jug. Now, the covering of a jug, people commonly would use it as a keli. The cover of the jug has a unique problem, that normally they would have handles on top, which means that if you were to use it as a keli and turn it upside down, you cannot stand it upright. And that is something that you can resolve by taking away the handle. When you have a broken shard, that was not made for a keli. Doesn't matter if it can stand upright. But if you have something that from the outside people would use the covers of kelim for a keli itself, the only problem is it doesn't have a stand. Here, if you either take away the handle, or we'll see other cases where you create a stand and it will be good. A wine pouch was made to hold wine, but it's a pouch, it's leather, it doesn't stand. If you make a stand, it's going to be good. That's shetikna, that's called shetikna. You added something to it that when you put it down, there's two sides. That's because it's called a keli. The only problem is it doesn't stand. But if you have a sock or a kupa, which are perforated, baskets and certain materials that are very porous, even if later you're going to fill it up with tar and you make a stand, it won't be good because it was not made from the outset to be makabel mayim. Aval sak v'kupa sheniskenu still ain't noidlan liyadayim. Now, v'layiten lachavede b'chafnaf. Can a person cup his hands, revius, and throw it on your friend? No, hands are not called a keli. She'ein chafnaf keli. The kelim shenishberu shvira materes esimidei. If any utensil, it broke, now we're going to a detail. We said generally a broken keli is not called a keli, but 1 second. If the keli broke to the point, the broken part cannot be used. What about the original part? So the top broke to the side, but the bottom is still there, and that was made as a keli. So we're going to learn in Hilchas Tumah V'Tara that if a keli broke to a certain point, the tumah automatically left, because all of the parts are called broken utensils. So if it's considered a shevet of a keli, de facto, the status of it being made to hold also goes away. None of it can be used. Because all of it is called shivet kelim. V'haraya, it became tahor. Halacha yud beis. B'chol hakelim noitlin yadayim. What must the material be made from? Anything. It can be klei galalim. They would have dung kalim or gewalt, clay adama, earthen kalim, but they have to be wholesome. V'hushiyah shleimim. V'keli she'ina machzik revius, or it doesn't have the quantity of revius. Let's say it's 3 ounces. Really, according to the Tzemach Tzedek, it's a drop less than 3 ounces. Ein noisnin mimenu liyadayin. Halacha Yud Gimel. So now we have a keli. Other dinner we should know lechatchila. We want for the top to be all rounded. We don't want a spigot. That's lechatchila. Okay. Everyone is okay to be the one throwing the water or pouring the water. Like we kept on mentioning, you don't need even koyach adam. You need koyach hanoisim. Koyach hanoisim would mean if a monkey throws the water on my hands, it's going to be okay. You don't even need koyach adam, but someone has to pour the water. Even a chedesh shoyte v'katan, even though they have no das. Im ein sham achar mania. Now, so you need to have someone who throws the water. Again, the Rambam is not beginning with our visual that I'm pouring it for myself. That's upset. If there's no one else to throw the water on me, and I'm trying to have the waters thrown at the same time on both of my hands, which means I don't have a third hand available to do that. I can put the cup between my knees, and I can manipulate my knees. I don't know, you have to be very flexible, and you can throw the water, and that's okay, because you're the noisin. Oy, yata chavis al yadav. If somehow with your elbow, you can make the keli tilt to the side, expelling the water, that's also good. Or, look at the third option. Noitel yadei achas v'tzak b'zoy al zoy. V'chayzer v'tzak b'rishayin al hashniya. After the fact.
It seems like the ideal is to have
clearly, that's what I was saying. It sounds from the Rambam, you have someone else pouring it on you. And now the Rambam wants to emphasize, it's not koyach adam, it's called koyach noisein. And therefore, even a monkey can be the one pouring the water on your hands. Halacha Yudalit. Hashoikis. Hashoikis is some sort of stone perforated utensil, a stone utensil that used to be placed on the mouth of a spring, into which you figured out how to get water from the spring into it, and then through gravity, it would trickle down from this shoikis through a canal, and it would irrigate a field. So says that Rambam, how did you get the water into the shoikis? Koyach adam. Or you turn the wheel that went into the... But now the question is, water got in there because someone got the water into it. Can I put my hands in there somewhere? And the water is flowing. If the water is flowing because of gravity, I may not. Even though the water got into the shoikas because someone poured it in there, but now that it's moving through gravity, it's not koyach noisen. If my hands are so close to the source that even without gravity, the koyach of the water flowing into it would go a couple of inches and cover my hands, that's good. And from there, water goes through a canal. And it's going to irrigate vegetables or animals. And you put your hands into the shoikes. And why? Noisin was on the shoikes, not on your hands. But if your hands are so close to where the bucket poured the water, means even without gravity, waters would have gone to where your hands are, then yes, also like tefillah. Let's move. Halacha tezvav. If you have a doubt, after we learned all of these rules, if malacha was done or not done, if you have the shear of the revius or doesn't have a shear, if they are tahoidim or tameim, safek natal yadav, safek lenatal yadav, in all of these cases, fake atar, shekol safek shebetaharas yadayim tahar, following the rule that safek midrabanan, you're lenient. Halacha tazayin. Mayim arishonim tzarich shiyagbia yadav l'mayla. When you wash your hands prior to drying it, make sure your hands stay upright, because if my hands were initially upright, guys, whoever can see the visual, and then the hands go down, here's the issue. The waters that are on my hands, even when you pour water twice, the halacha is that the second water is metahir, the mayim poured first, if they are in the space until my pedic. But if the mayim, the first, we throw a few times, if the water that you threw the first time moved down below your wrist, even if the second throw of water touched those waters, it was not metayed it. And then these waters that go back on my hand will be metame my hands. So keep your hands upright the whole time. Because maybe the waters went beyond your pedic, and then they're going to return if you turn your hands down, and they're going to be metame your yadayim. Mayim achrayim, never pick your hands up to begin with, because you're trying to remove poisonous salts. So why would you extend it? People ate with their fingers, they didn't eat with their palms. So now it's even worse. Don't let the waters extend. Keep your hands down the whole time. It doesn't matter where the waters go to. And here you have something very interesting. Why do you care if it goes on the ground? If it's sakana, people don't touch the ground, don't touch their eyes. This is already l'chura ruchnisdik thing. There is a certain unique type of tuma dafka mayim achroinim. And if the water is thrown on the ground prior to it getting absorbed, someone might touch it. Masha'inkin, if it's in a kli that's discernible, that's mayim achroinim waters, no one will touch that water. It doesn't matter the temperature of the water, because it's not about removing a sakana. However, the mayim achroinim ain't nitalim b'chamin. You can't use very hot waters. You know why? Because very hot waters are waters that you're not going to properly rub your hands to get rid of the poisonous salts. So the salt will be there. We're speaking about they don't properly remove filth because people are hurt, they're in pain of the heat of the water. You're not going to rub your hands, you want to get rid of the water, you don't want to have more water. But if they're lukewarm, then yes, you can even use that for mayim achroinim. A person can wash the hands for shachris and make a stipulation, this will be for the whole day. Now of course you can't have esach hadas, but the concept. But the moment you have hesach hadas, tzarech litol yodav b'chol eish tzarech netila. Halacha yudches lot adam es yodav b'mapa. The Rambam paskins lechatchila. You can put on a glove. You can put a shmata around your hand, so when you eat the bread, you're not touching the bread. V'oichel ben pas. Or as we began this payday, or anything that was wetted with water, even though you did not wash your hands. Now what happens if one is feeding, the other one is eating? Upon whom is the chiyuv? On the one that's touching the food or upon the person who's eating? The chiyuv is on the person who's eating. So if I'm feeding you, even if I'm using my hands, I don't have to wash. Now, when it comes to a kohen with truma, of course that's not the case. Because there, shniyos can make a truma into a shlishi. But we're speaking about takanas chazal by chulin that we had in netilas yadayim. It's the ha'oichel has to do netilas yadayim, even if the oichel won't even touch the food. Right? The only exception is if he covered his hands with this mappa. And the same thing that Rambam says, those strange people that eat with forks over there in Europe, they also know they can say, I'm eating with a fork. I'm not touching the food. It has nothing to do with that. Well, then, if you're eating b'magreifa, you have to do netilas yadayim. Halacha yutes asur lahachel mishal inotal yadav. I'm not allowed to feed you if you did not wash your hands. V'asur lizalzel b'netilas yadayim. And v'tzivuim harbe tzivu chachamim v'hiziru al adavar. We were very much forewarned about it. And even if you only have enough water to barely survive by drinking, you want to eat bread, use that water. Noitel yadav v'miksasim achakach oichel v'shoysim miksasim. And as we have Rabbi Akiva in the jail of Imam Mesiras Nefesh Mamish to use the water. And final halacha chaf tzarich adam lenagev es yadav. Finally, you have to dry your hands prior to eating bread. If you eat prior to properly drying your hands, also mayim achroinim prior to benching, the Rambam says you have to dry your hands. It makes a lot of sense because you're trying to get rid of melech sodoimus, l'Rambam. That was the ikar. Just because you put a little bit of water on your hands, maybe it's still there. Get rid of that. And right after mayim achronim you have to mench. You may not make any interruption. Even drinking water, if you did so after mayim achronim, you can't do that. First bench. Or let me word it differently. If you made any interruption today, wash mayim achronim again, and then bench immediately. God willing, tomorrow to be continued.
Really, shouldn't we use a revius to wash our
mayim achronim? No.